how can we unite our fractured society? And I think this is a really important question, because we we focus so much on this utopian idea of how things should be, but we don't really like, oh, it should be like this. Like, we should have a different education system sometime in the future, and one day when it happens, it will fix everything. Or we should not have property, or we should whatever. But I want to talk about what we can do as fast as possible today, sort of thing, because I love being practical. Um, Oh, and I kind of got distracted, to be honest. It's not just about that. It's kind of like like it's always somebody else's fault, and we need to really focus on realizing, yeah, sure, there's somebody else's fault, but it's also our fault, and we need to unite society. I want less blaming, because when we blame, we're blaming somebody else in society. Sometimes we try to blame somebody invisible, like the elite or something. But I'm not sure if that helps as well. A bit worried about that. Anyway, so can you please both give your definition of what a protest is, please? So yeah, I did say that I'm against a certain definition of protest, which is like, or the most popular one, I would say, which is a one-day march. A one-day march, and the worst quality about it is it's one day and it's against other people. And I basically call it tribalism. What about you, Wahid? What would you describe as a protest?
Well,
This is a question by all here.
a protest would be like a. It can be something which divides people. A protest could be, I don't know, something which something more meaningful, you could say.
Yeah, so you think, what was it, a protest is something meaningful?
If it is meaningful, then it should be classified as a protest. But if it's an excuse to just cause more trouble, then it shouldn't be classified as a protest.
Then it's a riot. Yeah,
Yeah.
what do you think?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. I like that. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so all here, so now we're talking about finding unity, and all here says, but go to the same school. And I imagine by that, it's the same kind of school, as in, maybe you can correct me if you want, all here, but like not some people going to private or elite schools like Eton, where most of the prime ministers of this country have come from, but like all the same kind of school, like all going to their local school, for example. So everybody is part of the same community. And so, yeah, schools are a very interesting idea, because I do find that schools are one of the last few bits of community that exist. Um, like, there's no other place. Like, there's parks, but people are individuals in parks, and they don't talk to each other in play areas. Like if you've got kids, but if you don't have kids, you're even more separate in these. There's these social areas, but we're not social in those areas normally. Does that? I don't know if that makes sense. Um, so should all protests have a manifesto? Yeah, but I don't think in just a manifesto. I think there should be community before. That anybody can have ideas, but following, really believing in those ideas is really important. Really following it consistently over a long period of time is really important, and that's actually really hard to have, a set of really good productive ideas, because often manifestos have two qualities that are coming to mind that are really negative. They're popularist, as in just popular for one group at the moment. These are manifestos that political parties have. Um, so yeah, that's one thing. I can't remember the other one. So they're kind of popularist, and also they might not be so wise and um beneficial for everybody. Like, how can you, like, so basically what I'm getting at is, I'm a big proponent of God's wisdom, because we and people really, I think people rejected too much religion, or they've gone really anti it, and I can understand why, because of how, especially in the UK, we've had some really bad experiences of religion. But it's really hard to define the perfect truth, because first of all, our knowledge of the world is very limited. So but maybe I won't go down there too much. Like, okay, forget, like, let's say there's an idea borrowed from religion. Okay, a really simple idea, like being neighborly, doing good before expecting anything from other people. Those are kind of manifestos we should have. But then it might not be, that might not sound like an average person's protest, but I think that's the kind of protest I would be. I like, my first protest is against my own community. It's like, guys, we need to get our act together if we want to be powerful, because if we want to make a difference, we're not going to wait for the elite to give it up. It's like, oh, you terrible elite, give us the power. That's not going to happen. We have to do it. So we have to go ahead and say, like, let's get united. Number one. How are you going to get united? Well, how about talking to your neighbor or being friend with your neighbor, and your neighbor thinking it's their duty to do that. And one of the things I'm going to keep coming back to religion, because religion is really powerful and can be powerful, but and also can be really destructive. If it's not really religion anymore, and if it's politics hidden, disguised as religion. But I'm going to quickly say this: happiness and community have gone down since churches have become less popular. Okay, and they've become less popular because of all sorts of bad things, like, pedophiles amongst priests, right? Priest pedophiles and stuff like that, which is obviously not any part of any religion, right? So it's gone corrupted. But we've lost community, we've lost the reason to be together. And so don't jump for atheism and all these things without realizing the consequences. And the consequence of not believing in a god is realize. So when you believe in God, all religions basically teach this idea that we are all children of God, and therefore we're all brothers and sisters. As soon as we realize we're all brothers and sisters, we're no longer strangers and competitors and haters of each other. And that's where all this divisiveness comes from. If you think you're brothers and sisters and you have a problem, you talk it out. You don't say, they're toxic, I hate them, I'm not talking to them anymore, and they are the enemy, because that is just happening all the time. And it's not getting fixed. How are we ever going to fix it? So, I mean, I've done a lot of talking, and let me quickly read out a few comments. And I want to read out a few comments, and I'm going to definitely tell this story about, like, what happiness and unity looks like. Okay, because I think stories are memorable. It's just how the human brain works. Okay, so a couple of comments, like, yes, there's a bit of agreement about what protest is, I think. And All Hills has said, Oxbridge just said today that if you are poor, you should not expect to go to Oxbridge. Okay. Yes, populist is the great danger. Yeah, because populism, we can easily be manipulated. So what is popular might not actually be in our own. Like, for example, I think Brexit was a bit of a mistake, because we need say the Polish people to do our farming, for example, and hating on them. We're suffering from it already. But anyway, because we can't get the people. But I want to quickly tell a story, if I can do it really quickly. It's about, like, what actually makes us happy, and about doing stuff for each other. And I think it's something Fable. I can't remember what they're called, some famous one. So basically, there's a modern version, and it goes something like, there's a guy who somehow comes across a lift. And he opens a lift, and there's a man inside, and it says, do you want to go up to heaven or down to hell? It's just for visiting. Right, and says, sure, let's go to hell first. So goes down to hell, and the door opens, and the person who's going to hell for the first time is really surprised, and he sees a massive table full of food, and these people sitting on thrones on this table full of food. That's it. Like, am I in the right place? Is this heaven or hell? Like, no, this is definitely hell. Then he looks closely and he sees all these people are hungry. Okay, and then he looks even more closer and you can see the spoons to feed themselves are huge, so big that even though there's so much food in front of them, they can't get the food into their own mouths because the spoons are too big. Does that kind of make sense? It's a bit weird.
Oh,
Obviously, in the real world, you just get you not hold the end of the spoon, but you kind of get the idea, right?
yeah.
So everybody's hungry despite there being so much food. And this is really representative of society at the moment, or the world at the moment. You know, people are actually dying of having, you know, being miserable despite being surrounded by people. There's kind of a analogy or connection. Like there's so much stuff, but we're still so unhappy. More stuff doesn't make us happier. Okay, so then it goes, okay, I've seen enough of hell, let's go heaven. So he goes up on the lift and gets to heaven, and he sees the same situation. He goes, a massive table full of food, people on these thrones, and the same massive spoons, but this time the difference is everybody's feeding the other person. And
Okay.
that's the really, and so therefore everybody's full up because they're feeding somebody else. Okay, you cannot really make yourself happy by serving yourself. You make yourself happy by serving other people. And maybe, hopefully, that story, although it sounds ridiculous, is actually very closely reflective of what psychologists tell us about what happiness is. Like meaning, finding meaning. What is meaning? Meaning is doing something good for other people. Meaning is not serving yourself just for the sake of serving yourself. That's not meaning. So any thoughts about that? We've got about a minute and a half. Be interested in what O'Hare has got to say about that idea of that. I mean, so what has that got to do with unity? Well, unity is realizing we need each other, and happiness is through togetherness. I do like my little phrases because they're more memorable. Happiness is togetherness. If people remember that, that would break this selfishness that is popular in individualistic societies. Yeah, there's a couple of ideas. Maybe somebody might and I said, and I haven't actually I didn't even read out my answer. Fight the evil of disunity with truth. So that's the truth. Those are truths, things that most people will agree are true. That's what I mean by truth. Ideas that tell us what really makes us happy. And once we know those things, we will realize that disunity and individualism or hatred for other people doesn't help anybody. If we only just knew that. I've only given you 30 seconds after I've done my massive speech. So any thoughts, Wahid, on this and all here?
Yeah, well, sometimes that is exactly it. It's the unity that is separating all of us. That's the problem. It's because we need to be more united. We need to know that as your point was, every single one of us, we are all brothers and sisters. We are all brothers and sisters, and we need to complement one another instead of attack one another.